So assalamu alaikum, friends. Thank you for joining on our third XR Muslims event. We've got some really good speakers here. Just to, because we're on this together, we've got the chat on the left. If people want to ask questions when people are speaking, and Fazila, who's with XR Muslims, she will post the questions towards me, and I can then read them out. Just also, if you'd like to just say where you're from on the chat as well, give us all a sense of like where we're all at in just see how that's working. We can get a sense together how far regionally we are within the UK. So we've got, I'll just introduce XR Muslims. So I'm one of the coordinators for XR Muslims. Safia Alessandro was introducing the last two calls. My name is Mothia. I with Safia, we sort of initiated XR Muslims during the October rebellion, XR rebellion, when we were invited as part of the Faith Bridge to come together. So the Faith Bridge was an action to support XR's message of the need to the climate and the ecological emergency. And the Faith Bridge was all the different faiths coming together. There was XR Jews, XR Christians, XR Buddhists, and XR Muslims coming together to support that message of the climate and ecological emergency and what faith can bring to the movement. And we continued then afterwards to build support for continuing that message and bringing the message of what Islam has to offer in its faith towards the climate and ecological emergency message and to towards climate justice. And so we've got some great speakers who will now bring to you some talk around these central messages around Islam and climate justice. First speaker we have is Mark Bryant, and Mark has been working with, many of you might know, Eco-Islam or IFEES, worked with them for the past decade and has been recently appointed its director. He's also currently the development officer for the Centre for the Study of Islam in the UK, in Cardiff University. And that's a research centre with an emphasis on sociological and anthropological methodologies to shed a light on the everyday lived lives of Muslims living in Britain. His work has involved him working with the Plymouth Marine Laboratory, where he's researched and worked with oceanic and coastal regional communities in building their resilience to the impacts to climate change. And so he also holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in Muslims in contemporary Britain, and a PGC in further education. He's also co-written a research paper on Islamic gardens in the United Kingdom. So very well qualified to be speaking around, I think, Islam and COVID and the message of climate justice around that. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and salam alaikum to everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. These are, difficult times indeed, and I think it's very important for us to always remember the human costs of what's going on at the moment. And so I'd like to extend my sympathies to everybody suffering, and especially those who are worried about and indeed have lost loved ones and friends at this time. But with that in mind, I wanted to speak to you today about life after COVID-19, and hopefully we can explore a brighter future where we can imagine the previously unimagined, or unimaginable. So what I'm hoping to do is to really concentrate on what we can learn and what positives we can take out of this very difficult situation at the moment. So I ask for your patience and understanding. I'm not very good with this particular platform, and so please forgive any of the shortcomings that I have. So this time that we have of lockdown, and especially Ramadan, is a time for deep reflection, where we need to think about the future that we want. And so, do we want to rush back to what we regarded as normal before, or do we want to make a new normal? And I would put it to you that it's the normal that we had before that got us to where we are now. And I think we need to be very aware of that. So not only the virus itself, which, as we know, has been caused by humankind disturbing the balance of nature. And we're told in the Holy Quran the importance of us keeping that balance. And I think now we can see the really terrible consequences of us not keeping that balance. But it's also the consumerist society that was our norm before, with its emphasis on things rather than people. And that normality was not sustainable, and we know that. I'll talk a little bit later on about, how we can tackle other people's kind of conceptions about that and how the situation could have changed that. So the similarities between the environmental issues such as climate change and pollution and the present situation that we have at the moment are very marked. Both are caused by humans not treating the planet on which we live with the respect, and by actions that do not keep that balance. So they also, and as I said, we've been told in the Quran the importance of keeping that balance. They both also have shown us that only one group doing the right thing will not work. We need to be truly global in our efforts, and it needs all people working together. I think the fact that there's been no borders with this virus, and there's been, whilst there are issues with certain groups suffering more than others, there's no doubt about it that there really is no escaping from it for everybody. And I think that's an important lesson that we need to learn about how we have to work together, because only by working together are we going to get ourselves out of the situation. So as environmentalists, we've traditionally faced two challenges. The first is persuading people that the activity of humans can adversely impact the planet. For years and years, people were saying, oh, it's too big, and these things are natural, and look at these big things that happen, and we can't really make a dent on it. So that's always been a difficulty with environmentalists, is to get over the message, yes, our activities can make a difference and they can adversely impact the planet. The second challenge has been persuading people that they can fix the problems, because again, for the same reasons, they think it's too huge, they think it's too, daunting to be able to make a difference. And so this virus, whilst it's absolutely dire and absolutely tragic, it's given us opportunities, and we need to take those opportunities that it's given us. So to take the first point that I made about persuading people that human activities can make a difference, we're going to emerge from this. And I think it's very important that we start talking about these messages when we've emerged from this. I think environmentalists are in danger of getting themselves, missing their message by, battering on about this too much at the moment, when people are really losing people and are afraid and everything else. I think we need to be a little bit careful as environmentalists and bide our time. And then when this is over, we will have this huge amount of evidence about what impact we've been having on the planet, and how us not doing certain things is making real changes. I think we've got to be a little bit careful about some of the stories that are coming out, and you don't want to make it too much miracles, but there's just going to be endless evidence for how us stop. Sorry? Okay, there's going to be, you know, endless evidence about how us stopping doing certain things has made a real impact on the planet. So that's going to make that message much easier and much clearer. But also, people are seeing with their own eyes what we can do when faced by this, and what we can do when we need to. And so we're going to be able to say to people, you know, yeah, you are going to be able to make a difference. You've just lived through this thing where we turned everything on its head. We changed everything. So this idea flies in the face of what those who are interested in keeping the status quo have been telling us. You see, they've been saying that we can't change a thing, and the unsustainable exponential growth was the only future. That was the only future we could look at. Consumerism and exponential growth. Let's all grow endlessly. And it's not natural, it's not sustainable. But before, they kind of held on to the steering wheel and they said, no, this is what's going on. But in a sense, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with this virus, because we can see that that's not the case. So this virus has given us the opportunity to reset. There's been a lot of talk about this idea of reset. But I just think as Muslims, we're pre-primed to the concept of reset. If you think about our 5 daily prayers, each time we'll do, the idea is that we wash away what was before and we face our Lord cleansed, and we go forward from then on. So that's 5 times a day we have a kind of reset. And then Ramadan, once a year, this blessed month, we given the opportunity to reflect on what came before and what we want for the future. And so what we need to do as Muslims, what we need to bring to the party is this idea that we already have of the importance of the reset, and that you can actually start anew and you can go forward without having to carry the baggage of before with you. So for me, this bizarre times allowed us to imagine the unimaginable. Since the beginning of this year, we've seen things that happen that we could never have thought possible before. If you had said, you know, the message that Extinction Rebellion was giving out, you know, the reason that it was falling on a lot of deaf ears is people were just so stuck in the status quo. There's nothing you can do to change it. Don't be silly. Of course, we can't change the economy. You know, everything has to have a cost, and everything has to work economically. Well, you know, that's just been shown not to be the case. That when we're in danger, we realize that there are more important things than this financial system that we got ourselves entrapped in. So we can now realistically imagine a future where we value people over things. And that's just so evident here in the UK when you look at you know, so much of the news around, you know, old gentlemen, you know, money, people clapping for the NHS, thinking about NHS workers instead of the economies of it. And so I think that's so amazing, the way that there's been this turnaround from thinking about things to thinking about people. We can imagine a future where we value sustainability over growth. We can get out of that cycle of constant growth. We can imagine a future where we can restore the perfect balance of this home that our Lord gifted us and put us in charge of and gave us the responsibility to take care of. We've had time to think, we've had time to reflect, and we know that the way that it was before is not sustainable. And so we know we need to behave differently going forward. And we can, once again, work with the natural world rather than against it. So we can see that the way that we have been taking care of animals and where we've been getting our food from, etc., has some dire consequences. And this, you know, unfortunately, this virus is one of them. You know, and this is because we're working in an unnatural way. And so, you know, we need to learn the importance of working with the natural world rather than against it. there's a stark reality that far more people will die from the effects of pollution and the consequences of climate change in this year than from COVID-19, by far, by far. And that's a really stark reality that we need to think about. Why can we stop the world for a threat that you know, will probably kill no more than 1 million people worldwide? Let's say it's 2. You know, when we know that there's 9 million people dying a year from the effects of pollution, and it's almost impossible to count the number of people who are whose lives are cut short by the consequences of climate change. And so we need to really think about what are our priorities, you know, that if a threat to millions and millions of people makes us need to rethink how we do things and how we, you know, run the world and how we deal with the world, then surely, you know, that's the same with our environmental situation, because that's more of a threat. It's killing people today. It's not in the future. You know, a lot of people look about the environmental issues as, oh, well, you know, it's in the future. You know, when you've got 9 million people dying a year from, according to WHO, from air pollution, it's happening now. So what do we do going forward? So as I said, after the immediate tragedy of this pandemic has passed, to me, the new challenge for environmentalists is to firstly help people understand that climate change is a global emergency, greater than what faces us now with this terrible virus. That's the important message that we need to get forward. The second is we need to go forward in the knowledge that if we treat our environmental emergencies in the same way, that we can indeed, that we have this, we can indeed imagine the unimaginable and take steps to save our home. And as I've said to people before, we have to stand in front of our Lords as human beings, not as Muslims, but as human beings. If we have to stand in front of our Lord and answer to how we did with this perfectly balanced, perfect environment that we were given, at the moment, you know, as a human race, the answer is not good. And you know, I truly believe that this is the final test where we can show that we can work together as humanity, and as I say to my kids, put our big boy pants on and start behaving like adults, behaving like grown-ups, and working together as humanity, because you know, our Creator made all of humanity, and it is not up to us to decide who is and who isn't more important to him. So I thank you very much for your time, and I hope that what I said is of some inspiration and help to people. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Mark. That was a really good covering of the topic, and I love the reset word. Very short, but it's also, like that talks a lot about the resetting as well, and this is given all of that time, so it's a great word to use. And if you'd like to ask questions in the chat, we also may have a bit more time for question and answers, because as our third speaker, oh no, he's just arrived actually. It's great. I'm just going to admit him to the room. We can go to our second speaker. Tobias is a junior research fellow at the Wolf Institute, a research centre on religion and society, and a postdoctoral research associate at the Department of Politics at the University of Cambridge, where he obtained his PhD just last year. Congratulations. He teaches courses on contemporary politics and religion, and is a regular contributor to the podcast Naked Reflections, and his work has been featured by BBC4. Tobias is a political scientist and scholar of religion, working in the fields of political theory, gender, climate change, and Islam in Europe. And if you'd like to introduce the title of your talk, Tobias, as well. And,
yeah, thank you very much. Muthir. Thank you very much, Mark, for this remarkable talk, and it perfectly dovetails in terms of the imagining the imaginable, the unimaginable that you've just mentioned. Also, thank you very much to Alessandra, Sophia, and everybody who's working in the background to make that happen. That is a really remarkable spirit of being able to make things happen, which is what we urgently need. So my talk is titled "A Crisis of Imagination, Islam and Climate Change." And I'll just first briefly give you some background how I came to this before I start the talk. So as I said, it's a huge honor to be invited to speak in this holy month of Ramadan. I came to get to know Muthir and other people from Extinction Rebellion Muslims through the October Rebellion, as I was a member of the Faith Bridge there, and have been really interested in the activities of XR Muslims in particular. My PhD research was on the interactions between the Muslim communities and the state in Germany and Europe, and I will draw a bit on that. But I think it really showed me in many regards like how what incredible resources and ways of thinking about the political issues of our time there are, and this is what I would like to draw on here. So at the moment, I'm conducting research on the political imaginaries of the Anthropocene, and I will go into more detail what I mean by this crisis of imagination. So what I'm not going to tell you about is what the Islamic resources are to act in an ecologically friendly way. This has been done on this webinar series by people who are very well versed and informed about these things. What I try to do is to show what, as a society, as human beings, what we need, and what the things are that religious groups, in particular Islam, could contribute in that way. So why a crisis of the imagination? The climate crisis we are facing today is the greatest challenge human society, as we know it, has ever faced, as many of us will know. Even to conservative estimates, just remind ourselves, by the end of this century, we are faced with drought, mass starvation, billions of people losing livelihood, and large parts of the planet, particularly in coastal areas. 2/3 of the world population live within 30 miles of the sea. In a couple of decades, with the sea level rise of 2 meters or more, cities like Mumbai, Kolkata, but also New York and Bangkok will have become uninhabitable. Larger parts of London, so the prediction, will be underwater. Many of us are familiar now with these scenarios. We have come to accept a looming catastrophe as part of our everyday lives. And as Mark alluded to, many people, including Extinction Rebellion with their campaign No Going Back, have linked the current corona crisis to the climate breakdown. But still, in our families, churches, and mosques, global heating seems to remain a somewhat marginal issue. As societies and as religious groups, we seem to fail to grasp the magnitude of the environmental crisis that is unfolding before our eyes. So why is that the case? Why do we struggle so much to eat, vote, and live as if the climate breakdown would be real? And what would we need to do to change that? And most importantly, what does this mean for people of faith? What does this mean for Muslims? In the following, I will suggest some ways to think about these questions. Again, I will not delve into the rich Islamic resources, the Quran, Sunnah, the everyday Muslim life across the world that provide answers to these questions. Rather, I will try to turn the gaze by discussing what a society that we live in is lacking, and why religion, and Islam in particular, could provide that what society so desperately needs. And I will do so by focusing on 3 areas. First, the crisis of the imagination. Second, climate ethics. And third, climate politics. So on the crisis of the imagination. In his book, The Great Derangement, which some of you I know have read with great enthusiasm, the Indian writer Amitav Ghosh tries to come to terms with very similar questions to the one that I raised. Thanks, Muthir. Since we have very solid scientific data on the catastrophic trajectories human civilization is on at the moment, why is the climate catastrophe still so marginal to everyday life? In his book, which I have to say, I think is the best thing that I've read on climate change, and I cannot recommend it enough, Gosh argues that the climate breakdown is as much as a cultural crisis as it is an ecological crisis. For thousands of years, religion has been one of the most important forces in human culture. How we should live our lives, what it means to be human, and how we think about the world are central questions to religion. Thus, I would argue the cultural crisis and the ecological crisis that we are facing is also a religious crisis. It is clear that some of the areas most severely and most rapidly devastated by climate change will be in North Africa, the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia. It is precisely these areas where a vast majority of Muslims live. 2 weeks ago, we heard from our brother Kede from Gambia how desertification and more frequent drought threatens the very existence of our communities. We heard from our brother in Indonesia how they struggle to bring the government to protect the tropical rainforest, the largest weapons against the greenhouse effect that nature has provided us with. In his novel, The Hungry Tide, Amitav Ghosh discusses how humans are ultimately overwhelmed by the power of the oceans. It is set in the Sundarbans, the mangrove forests that are inhabited primarily, again, by Muslims. Already tens of thousands of people have fled their ancestral lands. Despite these powerful testimonies, our society still acts as if the climate catastrophe would only be one policy issue among others, with less airtime than fox hunting or toilet paper. If we want to combat climate change, we need to challenge the crisis of the imagination. Since Muslims are among those worst hit by the droughts and floods unleashed by the climate crisis, there is a unique potential also to address this imaginative blindness. We need to bring the stories of these sisters and brothers that are right now at the front lines of the climate crisis, from the Sahel to the Sundarbans, to public attention. The transnational nature of the Ummah and the personal links that connect families across the globe have the potential to bring these stories to a dinner table. Just like coronavirus has brought science and politics and statistical modeling to our dinner table, it is our responsibility to bring climate science and climate policy to the dinner table, to the neighborhood meeting that we might go, to the minbar in our masjids. As our brother Kareem has mentioned the other day, there is no page in the Quran that does not refer to nature. Islam is in this sense a deeply ecological religion, where Allah uses nature to explain to us who we are as human beings. The importance of water, the richness of eating dates, the significance of the desert to the first Muslims shows us that nature and Islam cannot be separated. Like Judaism in the Torah, God is not only encountered through text, but also through natural events, through nature. Islam can draw on these rich traditions and reminds our friends and politicians that Ibrahim and Isa, just like the prophet himself, were deeply connected to nature every single day. These narratives can counter the modernist binary vision of the world that so clearly distinguishes humans from nature. Instead, the stories from the Sundarbans and from the Surat and from the Sahel clearly show how changes in nature, like the seasons, deeply affect our religion and our way of life. How more will our religion and our way of life be challenged in the deepest transformations of the atmosphere, the climate, and the flows of water through global heating? We need to tell the stories from the earliest Muslims in Medina to our sisters and brothers in the Sahel right now, and proclaim from the roofs and minarets that the crisis is a religious crisis. Now I'm turning to the second part, climate ethics. Of course, many people doubt that we should invest so much energy and attention to the effects of global heating. A common argument is that ultimately humans are more important than animals or nature. This is why we would first need to attend the poor, the sick, and the destitute. Another iteration of this argument is that we may not implement any changes that would have negative effects on the economy. Islam, as I understand it, offers rich ethical and political reasoning on why these arguments and these dichotomies are wrong. We need to convince people first that the climate crisis is a human crisis and climate justice is social justice, as one of the slogans of Extinction Rebellion puts it. Justice, economic justice, social justice, gender justice, climate justice, post-colonial justice are all interlinked. If hundreds of millions of people will be forced to become refugees, who do you think will be ready to welcome them with open arms? Who will have prepared their societies in a way that they can start a new life? Many Muslims in Europe have suffered Islamophobia and marginalization due to racism, labor market discrimination, and Islamophobic attacks. At the same time, also, they have shown a remarkable resilience and energy to build life worlds and create wonderful institutions. The lessons drawn from these experiences are urgently needed in a world where the population of whole countries will have to flee from the equator towards cooler parts of the earth, much of which will be in the global north. That those that are least responsible for climate change are those that are most affected is deeply felt injustice. That many of these people, like the hundreds of millions of people living in Bangladesh, Indonesia, and India, are our sisters and brothers, need to cause outrage. Outrage against the injustices that capitalist exploitation and the extraction of fossil fuels is causing. Religious traditions have the moral resources to call out these injustices, to resist purely economic logics and mathematical modeling. One environmental activist once told me that religious groups are the best partners in the struggle for justice, because even when the odds are stacked against them, they don't stop acting. Because they do things not because they are effective immediately, but because they are right. Climate politics. This does not mean, of course, that we should be naive about the incredible amounts of money that the fossil fuel industry pours into pseudoscience that denies climate change. We are facing an incredibly powerful economic system from which a small global elite are profiting enormously. That those 1% own the majority of the world's wealth, which include the riches of the Gulf countries, for instance, hide behind the facade of an economy that allegedly works for all of us. We're endowed by our creator with intelligence, wit, and critical spirit. In Islam, human community is crucial, as in many other religious traditions. The family, the people in the masjid, the ummah. Solutions to the climate crisis cannot be done on an individual level alone. Like Boris Johnson on Sunday declaring that it is now to each and every one of you to control the virus. There's a deep problem with this. This easily shows out to be inflected very strongly by neoliberal ideology. It is not individuals, it is the government who failed to provide enough PPE, to have enough ICU units, and to properly equip and pay the NHS. Like with the virus, Mark has pointed out, we cannot allow the powers that be tell us that it is only our individual responsibility to solve the crisis. Of course, every one of us has to play a part. But as people of faith, we know we need to act collectively. We need to act politically. We need to re-envision a society that works for all of us. And this requires a radical rethinking of what kind of society we want to live in. Who decides what the priorities are and where is power concentrated? These are tricky questions, and there are no easy, ready-made answers. But what is sure is that carbon capitalism is failing to protect us and future generations. Therefore, it is up to us to use our rich resources to draw on the wisdom of our holy scriptures, the creative ideas of our sisters and brothers around the country and the world, and our passion for justice that is so deep in our heart. The powerful only look powerful because we kneel before them. As people of faith, with the rich human stories and a deep commitment to justice, it is time for us to rise up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias. Powerful messaging and passionate. I can hear the passion in your voice as well, which is great. Great that I've got, by coincidence, the book right next to me. Of course, I didn't know you were going to mention that book. I didn't right there. I've just been I was reading it. It's before for for an XR interview we had. A third speaker, I think he's online, joined us. Shaukat. Shaukat, are you there?
I am.
Brilliant.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining. Shaukat, I'll just bring the introduction. It will be speaking about eco-mosques, and he he's a multi-award-winning social entrepreneur and currently the chief executive officer of Faith Associates. So only not come up properly on the.
That's enough. I think I don't need an introduction. I'm actually humbled by just listening to Tobias and the depth of which he's gone to, and I'm deeply humbled to be here. But thank you for the opportunity to kind of share some reflections and thoughts. And the speakers that have gone before me, I mean, incredible wisdom and insight. I feel that maybe my insights will not be as deep as those, but I'll try my best. Can I share a PowerPoint, if I may? It might help me to present it. Is that okay? I just want to also, before I start, I just wanted to thank Mark and his team and Harisa for putting this for the invitation, and they're doing some fantastic work, and we're always envious about the networks and the impact that they're making as well.
Are you able to share your screen now?
Let me just see if I can. Is that? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay,
great.
Thank you, Tobias. So I'm gonna hopefully be not too long. Basically, what as you were mentioning, I'm involved with an organization called Faith Associates. We've been working since 2004 to kind of help with governance and strategy for faith institutions. And what we've been doing, particularly within the Muslim sector, we've been trying to help with governance, development, strategy, and recently, over the past 5 years, we've been looking at this whole issue of rebuilding the infrastructure that has been set up over the past, say, 3 or 4 decades. And when the Muslim community in particular came to the UK, one of the first things that they built was the mosque. And I know, Tobias, when I was listening to you mention the mosque a number of times, and this is the primary institution that the Muslim community in the UK and in Europe have developed. And in the UK, for instance, you're looking at potentially in the UK, for instance, between 2,000 and 2,500 mosques have been built from the 1960s to now. That's a huge infrastructure. And one of the other areas that is seeing massive growth at the moment is the madrasa. And these are basically outer school settings or settings within mosques where children are being taught scripture. We're seeing a massive growth in that sector. Between 3,000 and 5,000 madrasas opened up in the UK. These are either in the mosques that have been set up, or they're actually in community centres or shops and even other rudimentary facilities. And this data has been gathered through research, from engagement, from talking to various people, and working literally every day and every month with mosques. And this is some of the literature we put together. But just to kind of tell you about the figures that we've seen, so 2,500 mosques in the UK and developing in terms of numbers, 3,000 to 5,000 madrasa. But what we're seeing at the moment in the past 5 to 7 years, the mosques that were established in the 70s and 80s are now being redeveloped, physically redeveloped. Because one the building's obviously too old now. Secondly, they're actually too small. The capacity of the community has, the capacity of those facilities is not sufficient for the population growth. So what we've seen at the moment is a rebuild value between £1 million and in some cases up to £25 million. You've seen the Cambridge Eco Mosque cost between 23 and £25 million, which is a huge sum of money, huge sum of money. So we've looked at currently, looking at all the projects in the UK at the moment, we are seeing currently people raising, and the current build value is between, I think it might be on the next slide, between 200 to 500 million pounds. That's a huge sum of money. Okay, a lot of that money is being raised in the UK. Some of that money is coming from outside of the UK, but majority being raised in the UK. I just came off a call just before this one, where just an extension of a mosque in Manchester, you're looking at 1.2 million pounds in Manchester, and 95% of that money is being raised in a 5-mile radius of that mosque. So clearly there's a massive appetite to rebuild. There is money out there, but have these mosques got an environmental focus on their rebuild? Which is what we found since when we started talking to them about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Eco elements of the rebuild were literally less than 5% of their decision-making process, which we think is absolutely criminal. If these mosques are going to be sustainable for the future, if they're going to be institutions that are not going to add to further the carbon footprint, they've got to think on an environmental level. This is so. What we've done is that we've, over the past 7 years, 8 years, we've been implementing something called Beacon Mosque standards. These are the 10 standards that we've been looking to implement, and on the back of these 10 standards, what we've done is that we've established the British Beacon Mosque Awards, and within those awards, what we did was we inculcated an Eco Mosque Award. And what we found is that using this kind of rewarding strategy, many mosques now are coming to us that are looking to rebuild their facility. They're asking us now, what environmental standards and what environmental designs should we be thinking about? Which I think is a fantastic evolution in the thinking of people who are looking to make a decision on what the mosque needs to look like. And one of the things that we're constantly banging on about, forgive my rudimentary English there, but we're saying to people, it's not just about whether you've got a solar panel on the roof. It's basically, we've got to think of it in a 360 point of view, right down from the people that worship there. Do they have the mindset from when they're in their home and they decide to come to the mosque? So from the cradle to the grave, if you've got that concept in the mosque, what type of concept do you have from the time that your child is born that you want to be connected with the mosque? What environmental standards and thinking does that child have? And whatever engagement that you're going to have, whether it's traveling to the mosque, whether it's thinking about learning and teaching and learning within the mosque, whether it's about the programs that you run from the mosque, all the way down from the electricity, the heating, the water, every aspect of the mosque should be environmentally friendly and should not contribute in any significant way to the carbon footprint. And we are taking it right from the decision makers and basically looking to help to educate the community that, look, if you're going to invest £1 million up to £5 million, up to £10 million, every single brick, every single wall, every single window that you're looking to implement, what is the impact on you as a person, on the society in which this mosque is going to be built, and also what is the future plan for this building for the next 5, 10, 50, up to 100 years from now. And that's some of the kind of conversations that we've started to have. And we're finding that the next generation that is potentially going to take over this facility are really having a very informed, we're having an informed conversation with them about what this future design is going to be. One of the key things that we're also suggesting to the mosques as well is that where you've got now cars being taken off the road, we feel that in the future, governments may force buildings to close down if they're not environmentally friendly. Okay, and that includes businesses and places of worship. And when we say to people, look, if you've got a COVID-19 situation where you're not allowed to open, don't be surprised if the government in the future basically say, well, that car's MOT has failed and it can't go on the road. Your building MOT has failed and you're not allowed to open it until you've got the environmental standards in place. So when we put that type of idea in front of people, it's incredible how they go back to the architect and say, we'll need to rethink the environmental standards on our buildings. So when we're talking to people, we're mentioning, you know, the worship, the lighting, the heating, the transport to the facility, the community impact, and the community services that mosques are delivering, how environmentally friendly they are, and we're basically talking about now this award scheme, gold, silver, bronze, depending on what quality standards they've got in place and environmental standards they're going to have in place to be able to achieve those standards. So in a nutshell, what we're seeing is from some of the work that we do, that there is a transformation taking place. There are people now beginning to take environmental standards within mosques seriously. And what we're seeing now is people looking at reconfiguring the designs to make sure that the environmental impact is reduced by the various practices that are taking place within the mosque. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Shaukat. That was really good. I really enjoyed the contrast between sort of the imagination and then to the practicalities of the actual mosque and the day-to-day life, and how, so we have to think of all these different levels of how we engage with Islam, and also with Mark's talk earlier around the current circumstances. So all three talks complemented each other, with Mark's talk complemented with the current practical situations that we're facing with COVID-19. We've got Mirfat now, who will, before we take questions and answers, and please use the box to ask any questions, and we'll also, if you can also ask a question live as well, on using the Zoom, which are either by using there's a reaction, I think under reactions, no, not reactions, there's a place where you can raise your hand. It's not, I can't see it at the moment. But if you could just put your screen on, and then we know that you want to ask a question, we could do it that way as well. But Mirfat was going to do a Quranic reflection first. Mirfat, if you'd like to introduce the ayah or surah you're going to reflect upon.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. With the Quran gonna play.
وقال الملك إني أرى 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخر يابسات يا أيها الملأ أفتوني في رؤياي إن كنتم للرؤيا تعبرون.
And subsequently the king said, indeed, I have seen in a dream 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 that were lean, and 7 green spikes of grain and others that were dry. O eminent ones, explain to me my vision, if you should interpret visions.
قالوا أضغاث أحلام وما نحن بتأويل الأحلام بعالمين.
They said, "It is but a mixture of false dreams, and we are not learned in the interpretation of dreams."
وقال الذي نجا منهما وادكر بعد أمة أنا أنبئكم بتأويله فأرسلون.
But the one who was freed and remembered after a time said, "I will inform you of its interpretation, so send me forth."
يوسف أيها الصديق أفتنا في 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخر يابسات لعلي أرجع إلى الناس لعلهم يعلمون.
He said, "Joseph, O man of truth, explain to us about 7 fat cows eaten by 7 that were lean, and 7 green spikes of grain and others that were dry, that I might return to the people. Perhaps they will know about you."
قال تزرعون 7 سنين دأبا فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون.
Joseph said, "You will plant for 7 years consecutively, and what you harvest leave in its spikes, except a little from which you will eat."
ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك 7 شداد يأكلن ما قدمتم لهن إلا قليلا مما تحصنون.
Then will come after that 7 difficult years, which will consume what you've saved for them, except a little from which you will store.
ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك عام فيه يغاث الناس وفيه يعصرون.
Then will come after that a year in which the people will be given rain, and in which they will press olives and grapes.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for that. The Quran uses stories. Quran uses a lot of stories, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows well. He knows that we like stories, not just stories that we, just to pleasure and pastime. Stories that we learn wisdom from. Stories that record history for us. So the way how the Quran teach in a lot of stories. So Yusuf story is number 12, and it's one significant story because the only time the Quran mentioned Prophet Yusuf is in that surah, and that surah is so detailed and concentrated on his story, and he never mentioned after. So it's a very, very fantastic story to read. Even it's not like the usual Quran surah that will have different stories in different places, and then you have a variety of different bits of the same story, like Musa or Isa, scattered around the Quran. So that story, I mean, the Quran itself, the first revelation of the Quran, Iqra, and the same surah have a qalam, pen, and educate. So there is a lot of emphasis on learning, thinking. The Quran always have knowledge, thinking, observe the nature and think about it, and the creation is used in in all of the Quran in that way. So we have to learn from the birds. We're learning how we live, how we bury our dead. You know, the first human learned from the crow how to bury. So we connecting to all the environment that we come into, and we learn from it. So the story starts. Yusuf is the son of Yaqub, the son of I forgot now, son of Isa, is Isaac, the son of Ibrahim. So the story is very focused, and the start about the dream. Yusuf have specific skill. All the prophets have, you know, fantastic, you know, skills, but each of them have a significant skill in one skill or abilities. So Yusuf had that abilities that I don't think so. I saw it in different prophets, which is interpreting dreams. So the story starts with his own dream. He saw a dream when he's a little child. So his dad said, "Don't say that to your brothers." And then the end of the story is the conclusion of his dream, or the dream come true by the end of the story when he started in front of the king. So Yusuf was a very wise young man, very specifically handsome. He was wise as a child and had that long story. I hope, you know, people who familiar with it know it, or not, just read it again. It's in the Quran. It's very accessible as a story, even for non-Muslim. You can read it as a story in the Quran as well. So he had the difficulties in his life. I'm not going to go through that, but we'll start with the dream as the ayahs that been read to you. So what happened is Egypt was a very, very strong civilization at that time. So we had king, and the Quran haven't called him pharaohs. I think pharaoh is like a boogie word, rose of a tyrant rather than ruler. So he used this king is a pharaoh, but he was referred as a king or ruler of Egypt. So he had this dream. And then he asked people around him. I had that dream. Obviously, that dream disturbed him, made him think there is something into it. So he took it serious. He asked the people around him, but it seemed like at that time they did not have really interest or knowledge of that. So the companion was like, "Oh, you know, it's nothing." So they have not seen it as serious as he saw it. But he carried on asking about that. So he took it a bit serious. It hit him, must be hit him hard. So then the one of the maid that was with Yusuf in the prison, and Yusuf already interpreted a dream for him before, and it came true. So he heard that, and he went to Yusuf in prison, and he said, "We think of this dream: 7 cows eaten by 7 fat cows and 7 slim cows." And the spikes and the leaves and dry and green. So what you think of that? So Yusuf straight away, he did not just translate the dream. He didn't say, "Oh, you're gonna have hard 7 years and good 7 years." No, the way how if you read what he said to him, Yusuf said to him, "You're gonna have hard 7 years. No, you're gonna have a good 7 years of harvest. Save it, dry the grains in its spike, and then you're gonna have a very hard drought for 7 years. And what you save from the 7 years, he said all, save it all except little that you're gonna be using. So and use it in the 7 hard years, and then the after that you're gonna have a year that probably all the crops that are gonna grow is olive and things that you can press on, which is gonna produce oil." So basically he heard that dream. Yusuf took it straight away as a serious matter. That's the king, not anybody else. And then the vision was, he didn't say to them, "You're gonna have hard years." He straight away give them advice. What he said to them, "You're gonna harvest and you're gonna store all of the food except a little bit what you're gonna use, and then you're gonna use it afterwards." So what happened is then the advisor, the guy who comes to him, went to the king and told the king about it. And then the king say, oh, that sound like, you know, it resonate with him. It made sense to him. He say, that look like a wise man. So ask for him, let me get him to me. But Yusuf wanted to clarify his name from all the, you know, for the reason that he was in prison. And he had a full hearing because he was in prison with no hearing to it. So that being sorted, so the king brought Yusuf to him. He recognized that this man is a very, you know, wise young man. And then he said to him, I will give you to be one of my companion, one of my advisor. So Yusuf said, oh no, I don't want that. You know, he was like, you know, very bold. He said, I want to be the treasurer. You know, imagine if you got the opportunity to actually, you know, the king, he was in prison and he's actually not even Egyptian. He's coming from Canaan. So he said, you know, he come out of prison and he had all these, you know, past, and the king offered you to be one of his advisor. And he said, no, I don't want to be advisor, a treasurer. So he had a very, very plan to what he wanted to do. Why he say that? Why he said he didn't say, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be the king advisor? Because I think Yusuf looked at the matter as a very, very serious matter, and he wanted to do it himself. And then if you slow down and you not look at it as just a story passing by and say, okay, what's gonna happen? Then Yusuf said, oh my God, we're gonna have this 7 years good and then 7 years hunger. So I'm gonna have to be the treasurer, and I have to make a system that actually makes sure that all the food that we're gonna have, we're gonna store it, or we're gonna have the 7 hard years, we're gonna have a, you know, ability to feed everyone. So if we slow down, then you imagine Yusuf on that position. The Quran doesn't tell you that, but you know, if you slow down and think about it, he gonna be encouraging growth, you know, agriculture. He gonna have building massive storage. He gonna have a media that, you know, push that story. Imagine people in wealthy Egypt, they're not just gonna go and live as a, you know, very poor, and it's gonna be very hard convince the people that, oh no, we're not gonna just go on and eat what we're eating as usual. We're gonna store most of the food, we're gonna eat little bit, so rationing that food. So he's gonna have media campaign, they're gonna have to sell the idea to people that actually, you know, it's not like business as usual, yeah, because we're gonna have fun. And if you imagine, if we have like with the coronavirus, we had the hit straight away. But if somebody said to us that coronavirus is gonna happen in 7 years, we need to prepare for it. Oh well, you know, we don't know. That's a dream anyway. You know, people did not really trust the dream, and the king they did not have that attitude to say, oh my God, yeah, it's a dream. You know, we need to. No, they just dismiss it straight away. But Yusuf took it a serious matter. So if you imagine that, there's nothing in the, I can't see anything 1 year, 2 year is all fantastic. You cannot plan for hard 7 years, but that must have a really huge sort of the whole system of Egypt that time will be changed. You know, the media, the people will have to say, oh no, we're gonna have to believe in that. And the king is just stupid, you know, he just made these dreams. Okay, so, you know, he done that, he set up all this, and then his own family who's from Canaan, they are refugees in our terms, really. They're not Egyptian, they came from outside begging for food. So you can see that disaster covered Egypt, and you know, Canaan is like Palestine area, and that will hit the whole region. You know, people will be starving. But because he took it serious, he himself, Yusuf himself, and the king, you know, with interest in that, the king himself take that massive part in organizing that the people of Egypt survive. Even the neighboring, you know, the tribe, the neighboring tribe, his families come begging for food, and he managed to give them that because he had that enough wealth, not just to feed the Egyptian residents and people coming from outside. So I thought that's really fantastic. And that's, you know, I read the Quran many times. We never really stop and think about stuff, you know, sometimes just rushing. But, you know, now I start to read it in a different manner, and I start to listen and think about it a bit deeper. I think that's a really fascinating surah to think about the crisis that we have as the environment, and how the Quran can play a really good part to sell the idea that we actually really have a problem. Yusuf did not, you know, the king did not see anything. There was 7 years, so but they prepared for it because they took it serious. So now we don't, you know, we gone beyond dreams. We can have our own dreams, and our rulers are, you know, Boris and Co. They're not gonna have nice dreams anyway, so they're all nightmares for them. But we get the science, we've got the actually the evidence, the events that are happening now itself play. It's how serious is the ongoing rain that we have, or floods, or and it's presenting these evidence that we actually having a problem. But nevertheless, these, you know, rulers that we have, they're not really interested in that. So I think why I'm talking about this bit here in XR Muslim meeting, that, you know, I think it's our role to be Yusuf, it's our role to be bold, our role to be taking initiative and saying, to hear the speakers previously, it's a fantastic, really, and the ideas of mosque, you know, to be eco-mosque, that's really, really fantastic. And I think, you know, we can, when we talk to Muslims, it's very important, you know, the eco words that we use as activists, or, you know, what the mainstream language is really not really strong. When you talk to Muslim community, you need to really use the Quran, and there's so many things in the Quran and Hadith that you can use and say, look what happened. If they haven't done that, what's gonna happen? So why I'm talking about that, because I'm thinking, you know, the Prophet said to us, like, if you see something wrong, fix it with your hand. So that's number one, with your hand. If you can't, you know, with your mouth. And I think that's what exactly we do. We do, you know, changing with our mouth. We talk about it, you know, we challenge. And if you can't, it's with your heart. And that's the weakest iman, which is, you know, people who are unable to do things. I think we are fit and healthy as a citizen. You can do changes. And the other thing, the Prophet said, the best jihad is a truth word to a tyrant ruler. And I think that's what XR doing. Is doing jihad, and I think we need to use that word more often. We need to say, we need to challenge the policies that we have, you know, for the generation to come. And yeah, and people listening to us not in XR, please join. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Mirfat. That was really excellent opening of that surah, relating it to the current crisis. I thought it's really interesting because Tobias opened up with the imagination, and, you know, you've chosen a surah which talks about dreams, and again, you know, we're into this place of the imagination and the crisis, but also the opportunities we have to begin to be like Yusuf, to speak to what we're feeling but can't yet articulate or see exactly clearly, and also the grains as well. That was really interesting, because I guess the economy, the word, it comes from oikosnomia, means management of the home, and so in a way the harvest is that Egypt's economy, and you know, and it's saying, you know, you've got to change the economy, you've got to save for the future, and we are in this growth economy, which was what Mark and Tobias was talking about, you know, and it's like we're always going to grow, so we can always just keep consuming, and yet that economy was saying, no, we must. The Prophet is saying, the prophecy is saying, you must save for this, because you will face this crisis. But we are facing this crisis, and we're not saving for this time. We're not taking the action we need. So yeah, all these things are coming together in these talks, and I hope the audience also found them illuminating. And you can either ask a question through putting a message, or fortunately we haven't got the Twitter feed hasn't gone. It's most of the questions will be here, and also if you wanted to raise your hand or use the reaction button, then I can then find out who wants to speak, and then direct it to you, yeah, and then you can just unmute yourself and speak. Well, people are waiting. I do have a question I wanted to ask. Actually, just to the panel, I think, on this question of the crisis of imagination. One thing that I thought that COVID was opening to us is that it's the message. Well, there's two messages, it seemed. One was that we're now finding that COVID is actually not, it's not everybody in the same boat. We're all in different boats. And there is, for example, it's saying that it's 4 times as likely to affect black or brown or minority people than people working in than other races. But it's also impacting upon poorer communities and the wage workers rather than more middle class. So it's kind of working on that level. And also we're finding government subsidizing oil and gas, spending billions of pounds. So there are these other impacts that it's opening up, as well as the opportunity to work together. There seems to be it seems to be opening some questions around the injustices in our society. I just wanted to reflect on those two things. Maybe Mark's got his hand up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the fact is those injustices existed before. I think listing the injustices that are already there is, I think we need to try and bring the positives out of it. But absolutely, you're right. It isn't fair. But what's extraordinary is the way that it's shut down the world. That's never happened before. The way that the Prime Minister can get it. These are the wake up calls that I think are positives. But absolutely, the injustices that have existed through history, are still there and need to be fought and are problematic. But I think there are some extraordinarily positive lessons that we can take from it. I think that, the fact that it's taken everybody working together in order to make a difference is a real positive that we can bring out of this.
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you, Mirfat, for the beautiful explanation of that story, which obviously is also reported in different ways in the Bible. So again, this is a story I think that is shared also across the different religious traditions, and to Shaukat's view of the eco-mosques. So I think there are many things to learn from COVID and from the situation. And I totally agree that one way to think about it is that I think is helpful is this idea of a litmus test of what is actually going on in our society, which is often the case when you have a crisis. When you press and pressure something, you see how it actually is. And so some of the racial inequalities have already mentioned. I think another one is strongly a gender inequality. That's still the burden on now caring for the children and actually maybe having to work while at the same time having to care for the children mainly falls on women. Just from my profession, the amount of academic papers submitted for publication between men and women has drastically changed in favor of much more men being able to submit papers according to women. So I think also that shows us where the responsibilities lies. And of course, also when you say everybody should return to work, but the schools and the nurseries are still closed, who usually then has to care for the kids? And very often this is still the responsibility of women. And so I think it shows how these emergency measures, by whom they are enforced and who thinks about them. And as ever so often, if you don't have people around the table, then often you will decide on things that are not to their benefit or ignore their specific needs. As to the question of how to think about politics in a novel way, and kind of whether it's obviously not the equalizer and what the different boats are. I think one important parallel is to the globality, so that we need to think about societies and politics necessarily in a global way. But global cannot mean this, universal, just everybody, but globally structured. And there are different ways to think about it. There's kind of the center-periphery model. There's a global north, there's a global south. There's people or countries that do have a good health system and the money to support that, and countries and societies that don't. So every political action, both on Corona, I suppose, but particularly and much more so in the climate crisis, it needs to draw on these various resources and needs to be a global. And therefore, we need a global movement, and it cannot be isolated. It cannot be nationalist, that's for sure. Like, the nation is definitely still an important political angle in polity, but we definitely need to go beyond that.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to make a comeback to that, or have you got a question?
Yeah, no. I wanted to say that Tobias is absolutely right. I mean, I was born in Africa, and my heart sank at the thought of COVID getting to Africa, because I was aware that our isolation and our ability to shut down is very much a Western kind of wealth related ability. And I think that turning that towards how we view, going forward with, how we see the global way that we tackle the environmental crisis. I just wanted to underline that. I think that that's really important, because we can't do it in the way that we've been doing it up to now because of these inequalities that are there. I just wanted to kind of, reiterate that.
Thank you. Sami, you got a question?
Assalamu alaikum. Oh, hang on.
All right. Us to hear. Assalamu alaikum.
Bryant, yeah.
Yeah, just related to the last couple of responses. I was wondering, it made me think a lot of Slavoj Žižek's comments on the fact that, the idea of isolation in somewhere like India is kind of an impossibility. So off the back of that, I was wondering if any of our speakers had any thoughts on Islamic critiques of capitalism, which I think has this way
start thinking about that. So obviously there's kind of Naomi Klein, Georges Monbiot, and people that for a long time have said, well, capitalism is the main driver for the climate crisis. And I think that's true to a very large degree. That is an accurate analysis. But at the same time, I also think that actually in a lot of kind of anti-capitalist and leftist thinking, there's still this understanding of nature as something that we need to exploit to produce more goods. And even in some of Marx's thinking himself, there is some sensibilities to the importance of nature and the problem of its exploitation, but there's still this idea we need growth to create more goods so that we can distribute them among everybody, and we need more automation in particular so that we have to work less. And I think this is a thinking that has been quite integral to large ways of thinking on the left. So I think there also needs to be a thorough self-critical awareness to what extent these anti-capitalist frameworks are still helpful. And I do think that the society that we need to reimagine, actually we need other sources as well to just say, well, just without capitalism. But there are important questions to be answered. Again, how do we want to make decisions? On basis of what values? Where are these decisions being made? How do we want our streets to look, our neighborhoods? How do we redistribute goods? I mean, all these questions need to be answered even once capitalism is gone. And for that, I think we need all possible resources that we can have. We need moral resources. We need stories that make people passionate about justice and compassionate towards their neighbors. And therefore, I think it needs to be a plural and multifaceted movement that also imagines a world after capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, David Suzuki wrote, in the 80s and 90s, about the fact that one of the difficulties is that a lot of the resources that we have, we use in terms of our, existing monetary system. but that we don't actually play fairly. So, for example, with a forest, the original forest is taken as a zero value, and then everybody takes their money, and you end up with the tree ending in a piece of fine furniture, and everyone's taken their kind of cut, and that's how our system works. Each person adds value to it, but it started with a zero value, and we never really thought about the cost to the earth that we should be paying in the first place. And so I think, you know, these systems that we have that exist at the moment, whether it be capitalism, whether it be socialism, that none of them are based in an idea of working with nature. They, you know, nature as Tobias says, you know, is seen as a resource rather than as that we're part of it. And I think that's the reimagining that needs to happen, is a system by which we value things in a very different way.
Thank you. Yeah, I just posted a link to Positive Money, which there was a really interesting talk that they gave, I think just yesterday, and it had the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, and some other economists, just talking about the difference between capitalism and not green growth, that we have other ways of, like, either degrowth or other models, or steady state economics. So it's just, this makes me think of Mirfat's actual the surah, actually, because, you know, it's about different ways of not just growing and eating or consuming. You know, even green growth maybe not the right way, because we're still thinking about growth, and which are adding more rather than just decoupling the idea from growth from moving to a green economy.
And if I just may briefly chip in onto that, I think also we need different models of measuring what a successful society is. And obviously GDP is the problem, that it doesn't show actually what the average of the people even get, let alone how the inequality is also changing. So this idea of the trickle-down economy has proven to be wrong. And that's why I think the search for other economic models is really important.
Thank you. So anybody have another question that they would like to ask? You can either just speak direct. Salam, Rian.
Well, not really a question, because I only just recently joined. I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting these kind of events, because they're really useful, especially during a time of Ramadan. So also because they're now virtually, it's like it doesn't matter that I no longer live in England. I can still peep in and join and listen and learn.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Thank you. Asia, would you like to ask a question? Or are you clapping? I wasn't sure if you're asking a question.
I was clapping. I was clapping.
Oh. Okay. You were on mute before, so yeah. Would you like to ask a question?
No, I was clapping.
Oh, clapping. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Sammy, did you have your hand up again? Or somebody else? Was that somebody?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Hello, I'm Nazita, daughter of Hafia. I just wanted to say a little thing. I don't want to ask questions, but I just want to say that economies have to be built on the basis of regenerative agricultural systems, which regenerate ecosystems. And that is the kind of growth you need, because it actually puts value back into the soil, value back into the earth. It builds ecosystems rather than destroying them. And if you don't have an economy based on that, you're not going to succeed. You're going to have your civilization will collapse in the end if you're not managing your ecosystems properly, and you don't have ecosystem services that are sustainable. So that is the kind of, and capitalism is okay if it is tempered by morality and by compassion. And Islam is not against capitalism, but it puts it within limits. And Islam is for the free movement of goods and services, and it's also for the progress of people financially, but as long as they give back. And the trouble with capitalism today, it is very ruthless, and it's about hoarding, and it's about keeping wealth amongst the rich. And we were warned about this in Islam, that the wealth should not circulate just amongst the rich, that everything will end up collapsing, and that a lot of people will suffer. And that's what's happening now. There's the 1% or the 0.1% who have, such a large proportion of the world's resources, and they're not really allowing much to trickle down at all. They're very determined to keep it, and they don't want to share it, and that's one of the main problems. That's why so many people are suffering.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. Mirfat, did you have a? No.
Yeah, I just wanted to support what the sister was saying, because the Islamic ways, anything beyond your need, it's not yours. So you limit yourself, and beyond that is to circulate. So the money, basically, something that you hold and you go around. So whatever beyond what you need for the basic needs for you, then you pass it around for the orphans and poor and low works and so on. So the money is nothing to accumulate, and there's so many verses in the Quran. Probably, at some point we need to gather these sort of the Islamic economy from the Quran and the Sunnah. Anything beyond it should be circulating, nothing static. And Islam is clearly against the interest, and it's if we're going to continue with the interest, you are going to wage war. Allah promised us war, so that's really, it doesn't make anybody shaking.
It should, yes, it should.
So there's so many things in the Quran. The money is not ours; it's something that we pass around. I just wanted to think about, probably we have some sort of Islamic economy, that how it's supposed to be. Not just looking at what the historical Islamic empire did, but actually going to the root of it and have some sort of a model that we can say, look, that's what it's supposed to be, and that's how we're supposed to function as a human, as a khilafah. So we need probably to have some sort of a Islamic economy without asking the Saudis and the others.
Thank you, Mirfat. Just got a couple of minutes left before we reach maybe one more question. But I've got Mark, who just had his hand up.
Yeah, no, I think this is really where as Muslims we have our strength, is that we have a system within our faith which is designed to combat exactly these things, because it's not only the usury that's an issue, it's this money made of nothing, and all the millions that Zita was talking about. That shouldn't kind of exist as a concept. I mean, the fact that if Elon Musk literally sends a tweet saying that Tesla shares are too expensive, and that loses 14 billion off the value of that company, then you're working within a financial system that's literally built on nothing. And this is what our faith is extremely strong as. It's not only saying, you can't do this and you can't do that. It's putting in place an alternative. And what the sister was saying there is absolutely right. This is where we need to grab that opportunity to start doing what our faith tells us to do, because it's actually better for the whole world.
It takes a lot of people to work together. I think you have to have a lot of people intending to work together to actually make it happen.
Yeah, we have to come together. I think that's the And if anything that COVID has made us aware of is that because it's saying, if I step out the door, it's going to be impacting somebody else. So I've got to think about my neighbours. So it's making us think much more about how we are all interconnected and interdependent.
Yeah, we're all part of at least one big human ecosystem, which we've managed to realize this at last. And we are part of the microbial ecosystem as well, that we're impacted by it. Yes.
Thank you, friends. I think we've just reached 7:30 at the end. I was going to finish with a dua that was written by Kamran Shehzad from the Bahu Trust, who was in the first webinar we had. and Fazila will read it out. But just before that, just wanted to thank our speakers, Mark, Bryant, and Tobias Müller, for some really excellent talk. And we did have Shaukat, but I think he's left the webinar as well. But thanking him as well, and Mirfat as well, for the excellent reflection, and everybody for attending and questions. Thank you. Fazila, if you'd like to.
Assalamu alaikum. It's really nice listening to all of you. Thank you all for being a part of it. We're going to start the beautiful dua that was written by Kamran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O Allah, you are the creator, the all-powerful, the sustainer of life. Forgive us for being careless with your earth that you created in perfect measure and balance. O Allah, inspire us to love and care for every part of your creation. Allow us to encourage others to care for your creation. Allow us to take seriously the role you have given us to be your steward on earth. O Allah, allow us to implement the practices of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by caring for all species, planting trees, valuing each resource, and being grateful for the use of any of your creation for our needs. O Allah, protect the people living with the effects of air pollution and give them strength. Give patience and strength to those facing rising temperatures, drought, water shortages, unpredictable weather, failed crops, flooding, and land loss. O Allah, allow all people everywhere to recognize the importance of protecting and maintaining your creation. O Allah, change us and use us in ways you are pleased with for the restoration of your world and the protection of all your people. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Qabbalallah.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Assalamu
alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.